it is tied with a slotted bead, so it retains a little bit more weight for that sink rate.
You remember when you first saw the Perdichingon? What you thought of it?
Oh, I was like, this is it. I mean, you know, and even when I
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of Flies for. Sitting with me is Norman Maktima, and we're going to be talking about flies for springtime fishing. It's the time of year we're really excited to get back out on the water, have a little bit of fun, and shake off the cabin fever. And so we're going to dig right into it, and we're going to start with some of the flies that we're going to fish in the spring. The cool thing, Norm, is there's a lot of your flies sitting in front of us to talk about.
Yeah, we got a few. Got a couple new ones, and some that have been in the Umpqua lineup for a number of years. So yeah, we'll dig into those ones.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
So
start new?
Hey, let's start new. Let's kick off the new stuff. So in this cool little cup, we have the Flash Fave, which is new for this year. And Flash Fave comes in a variety of colors, 3 colors in particular. So there's an orange with a copper bead, black with a silver bead, and pink bead with purple body. So these are tied with ice dubs, so just kind of highlights the fly a little bit more. But in particular, these patterns, the black and the orange can pass off as smaller stonefly patterns. You know, and the pink and purple, just a great attractor. Again, just like us, the fish are coming out of their winter doldrum. Water temperatures are getting a little bit better, so they're getting more active. You're seeing that with bugs, so just kind of everything's in just overdrive at that point. So throwing something with movement, great color, just again, great presentation. You know, they're pretty much gonna want to eat it. So these have been great. These come in sizes from 12 down to 18s.
Jig hooks, sticks real well.
Exactly, XC400. So great for that Euro-nymph technique, tight line stuff, but also don't be afraid to run it off of an indicator. You know, bobber down, so just get it done. But no, definitely a great one to have for that spring time frame. On
this one, Norm, this builds off of a fly that's been in the Umpqua catalog for how long?
Honestly,
it's gonna date you.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
But the HDA Fave.
The HDA Fave variant. So that is basically my comp version of a custom tie that High Desert Angler did. So that's where the HDA comes from. So I modified that and morphed it into a comp variation that I love to fish.
Which is a staple in like my box and a lot of folks' boxes. We do a lot of HDA Faves here at Umpqua.
Yeah, nice. I dig it. I love it. And I've heard that from a lot of people. They love the HDA Fave variant. So this is a spin-off. Again, comes in multiple colors. And so just, again, more of an attractor. But again, that orange and black definitely keys into either stoneflies. The orange can also be swung out as a, you know, a caddis pupa too. Do
you feel like in like the winter months, as these fish are just kind of like getting their feed going, that they like something that's a little bit gaudier than like super match the hatchie sometimes?
Oh, for sure. You know, and you'll see fluctuations in your flows. Again, we're not totally out of the snowstorms that time of year, so you may have some snow that'll roll in. You'll get a little bit of runoff happening, and so having something with a little bigger profile just will catch their attention. And again, you know, they're just hungry. They're, you know, the bugs are starting to really move around, so they're putting their feet on and you know, looking for something to eat. So having something with a bigger profile, I always, when I approach water or try to select flies, I tend to go as big as I can get away with. So I'll start that time of year, depending on flows of water, you know, anywhere between a 12 and a 14, and then fill it out from there.
It's a lot more hooked than a 20 or 22.
Exactly, yeah. So I like to go big.
The other cool thing that I'll just say one last thing on these comp style flies that you've got here, they've got kind of some attractive color to it. They're on that jig format. The other thing I really like about that's just great in general, it's your weight. You don't need to put, you know, any split shot on this. Like,
100%. You know, all your weight's integrated with that tungsten bead, and there's no lead wire or anything wrapped into these. So that profile, again, these are tied, even though they have a soft tackle collar, their sink rate is actually pretty solid. CDC with Brahma hen over the top of it, it does sink pretty fast. You know, that softer material just cuts through the water pretty nicely.
And just swim.
Exactly, and breathes for sure.
All right, so we're gonna move this one, Flash Fave, love it. Check it out in bins near you. Let's talk about something that might pair nicely with.
So on top of this, we can get into the Perdichingon. And I know a lot of people have issues with the name because it is not all that familiar with them, but Perdichingon, Perdigon, Chingon. Chingon is slang in Spanish and is utilized quite a bit down at home. It's kind of like so this is pretty much what that is. So
pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Bleeping this out for the kids on YouTube.
Yeah. Right. Earmuffs. So no, getting into this, we have this in two colors, peacock and gold, as well as purple body, pink bead, coming in sizes from 16s to 20s. And you can utilize this in a more match the hat situation. You know, your Baetis, your blueing olives, and yeah, in particular in that early April timeframe, that's when you start to see a lot of those blueing olives really start coming out and moving around a lot more. So, and they tend to be a bigger size than the rest of your hatches in your blueing olive family down through the summer and late fall. So you can definitely get away with. I've fished 16s quite a bit during that time frame and do well with them. So I like that. They're tied on that 113, which is a good stout hook, and retains well. You know, when you set, it leans into it pretty nicely. So you lose very few fish. So yeah, that's another good one for that spring time frame. And you know, you can kind of dial it in a little bit more with your sizing, but for the most part, great attractor as well. You know, so if I were to run this would be, if anything, the Flash Fave would be on my point, so on the bottom, and if you're Euro nymphing, and the Perdichingon would be on the dropper. You know, that's how I would set up my rig personally.
So Norm says this pretty casually, like he has a little background in this. Not only have you been a guide and worked in fly shops for a long time, you had a long history in the competitive scene. Can you give us a little background there for just a second?
Competed. So I started competing in 1997. So been in the game since that far back, and competed all the way up until about 2018. But still involved with Team USA. Coached the women's team in Czech Republic earlier in 2024, and looking to coach them again in 2025 at their World Championship here in Idaho Falls. So
amazing.
Yeah, so still involved and still have to, you know, step it up every now and then. And
well, over that tenure, if I'm not mistaken, you were one of the group that brought back the original kind of Perdigon platform to the Western style of fly fishing after a World Championship, correct?
Yeah, so you know, Perdigons, they definitely had their resurgence, if you will. So it came, and with this style, and actually, I mean, you know, with us in competition, we were always kind of on that forefront of development of flies and techniques and stuff like that. So I mean, you were a part of that too. So, but I remember fishing with Antonio Rodriguez and him showing us their Portuguese version of their Perdigons, and yeah, so it just kind of started to build out from there. So yeah, we were on that forefront. Mine's are these Perdichingons are actually tied a little bit different. They're a little bit stouter in profile. I do like to oversize my beads on a lot of my patterns. Again, I want that sink rate. I want to be in the zone as quick as I can. And so in comparison to some of the other Perdigon patterns, the Perdichingon has a little bit heavier bead on it. And really that's just to get down. And they're still, even though it's a straight shank hook, not a jig hook, it is tied with a slotted bead, so it retains a little bit more weight for that sink rate.
You remember when you first saw the Perdigon? What you thought of it?
Oh, I was like, this is it. I mean, you know, and even when I would bring it back and utilize it on my guide trips and stuff like that, I'm like, it's funny because you have clients fishing with it, and then they go to check, for moss or weeds or whatever. I always told them that, trout hate solid. Always check your flies every so often. And so they shout out to me like, "Hey Norm, my fly fell apart." And I'm like, no, that's it. It's just basically thread on a hook and
What'd you
and
get?
a couple colors and a tail. That's it. And they're like, "That's it." I'm like, "Yeah, throw it back in there." Sure enough, they'd hook a fish, and I'm like, that's all you need, man. Mayfly nymphs are pretty sparse.
Pretty sparse.
But yeah, it was definitely. I don't know what the term I want to use, but it shifted away from like what traditional hares use, your pheasant tails, legs, and
just even like the
dorsal
HDA, the Flash Fave versus that. I mean, it's like
Right.
they're two wildly different profiles.
Exactly.
So it's cool to be able to mix those on the same rig. And
Right. Yeah, you get two different effects too. So you have the slender profile, the fast sync rate, but on the HDA or the Flash Fave, you have movement. You have a lot more
Fly's working for you a little
exactly,
bit more.
yeah. So, but at the same time, you can get away with something bigger because it has that movement aspect to it too. So versus these guys, they're just fitting the profile or the silhouette of your aquatic insects that are down there. So.
Well, I love it. I'm going to ask you to come up a level here. So we've just
Yeah.
been living under the surface. Let's talk about these little guys here and kind of that first great mayfly hatch of the year.
Yeah, so, again, come April, pretty much in the West, you're looking at blue wing olives, just taking over the scene.
Yes.
And I love that part. Yeah, so, cloudy days, you get these, the adults sitting on the water for a lot longer time frame, letting their wings dry out. But again, don't let that deter you. Even on those sunny days, they're still going to hatch. They just won't sit on the water for that long. I do see a lot of times in the evenings as the sun drops and the shadows hit the water again, those fish will be back up on the surface. So, don't rule them out even in those sunny days. They're always there, but in those cloudy days, and especially if it's calm, very little wind, you'll just have heads and pods of heads just coming up everywhere.
It's the best
so it's one
feeling
of my
ever.
favorite time frames.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we got the low water Baetis, and this little guy, you have your traditional patterns, or I guess say somewhat traditional, like your parachute Adams, very heavily hackled with the post and the body profile, very thick and robust. I really wanted to develop this again in competition where, you're dealing with other competitors working through water ahead of you, right? So you got to come up with something that's going to be a little bit more on that edge. And even at times, especially with grayling, selective browns, they can be pretty judgmental on your flies. Seen that a lot. Exactly. So I just wanted something that was very slim in profile. Again, with the Perdichinons, kind of took that mindset into the development of this fly. So came up with the low water Baetis. Very slender profile. It does have 5-bit tails on it, but just to keep that impression very light. And the hackle on it, 1 to 2 turns of grizzly hackle. I like that grizzly, just gives it that speckling, looks like segmentation and legs. But again, very sparse imprint on the water surface. So when you're looking at those situations where you have flat water, clear in particular, the impression of this fly is very much matches what the impression of a natural looks like on the water. So 2 things you can do with this too. You can leave it as is, so it's fully hackled. You got the grizzly pommered around the head of it, which is great for some of that more choppy water, riffle type stuff. So it floats really well and nicely in that regard. One thing that I do on occasion is, again, if you're in that really flat, that glassy pool-like situation, I will actually trim the bottom hackles off so it sits a little more flesh.
Low rider a little bit.
Exactly. Sits a little more flesh in the water surface and will eliminate too much of that impression on the water. So you get a little bit better profile on it. Yeah, just a little bit of...
There's so much detail to this little fly, which is so cool.
Yeah, exactly. And so, slender abdomen, boxy thorax to it, and that's really what you got for most of your blue wing olives when they're out in the water. So
Little moneymaker right there.
yeah, exactly. No, you take this out and have fun.
Well, a couple other bugs here. Let's take a look at kind of another in that same realm as some of those other nymphs we were looking at, but this one's not by you, but someone you know well.
Oh yeah, so some of you may know this guy, Egan. I think Egan, Lance, something like that. Yeah, so man, myth, legend for sure. Egan, good buddy of ours, competed with us on Team USA for a long time as well. I remember actually when I first met him we were in Boise. That was his first introduction to the team and all that, so that was pretty cool. So yeah,
but he's got the same waders today that he still had in Boise.
I mean, if he would have held onto that Willie J chest pack, he probably still has it.
I'm sure he has it. It's just disintegrating.
Yeah, exactly. Just the magnet is still like barely hanging on. But yeah, so the Warrior, the Perdichingon, is definitely a good one for that time frame as well. When you're looking at a lot of these bluing olives in their emergence, they're secreting gaseous bubbles as they start to rise off the bottom. It captures a lot of light, and so that's where the Warrior series, I think, in Egan's repertoire just does really well, shines, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of light capture, and again, this is kind of where silver beads for me. I get asked a lot, like, what's your favorite color in beads? And
I was going to ask you, because we had 3 different ones here on the Flash Fave.
So we got silver beads. That's probably my number one. I incorporate it in a lot of my patterns. And the main reason, if you look at the gaseous bubbles that are secreted around an emerger, mayfly emerger in particular, that light that's captured or the reflection it gives is silver in color. Seen a lot of cool video on, when they're in that phase and they are silver, they're bright. So having that pearlescent hue to them just really captures that effect.
You just have to get a curiosity out of a fish to come over and...
Exactly. And I mean, on the flip side, like I mentioned too, go big or try to get away with as big as you can get away with. You're highlighting your fly out of the tens of thousands, if not millions of other aquatic insects that are there. Just giving yours a little bit more highlight could get the fish to come over and avoid the other ones and take your fly. So...
Well, since you're talking about trying to be as big as you can get away with, this is one of the flies you've picked out, and this is Garrison's Sexy Stone.
Yep.
And tell me about why this one is in here for springtime fishery.
So at that time frame, again, we've gone through the winter time. So usually, beginning of winter, all your hatches are done, and so what that means is all your aquatic insects have laid their eggs and have started the new generation. So you get this development of aquatic insects through the wintertime into the spring. That being said, your stoneflies, they have a longer lifespan than most of your aquatic insects. So, some of these stones probably been in there 2 to 4 years in their development phase, and they're just in their nymph phase. So they're always pretty much available, but you're getting close to that time frame where they're going to hatch. So usually you get runoff, and then post runoff, they start to emerge out of the, they've moved up the banks and are coming up on the vegetation. But those big stoneflies will start moving around, and I think they just get a little antsy. And again, fish are on the feed, so if they see something that big and available, they'll hammer it, So, and this is just a cool pattern, man. I like just the style of it, the creativity of it more than anything. But yeah,
Garrison's an artist. I mean, it reflects in this pattern.
Exactly. Yeah, you think outside that box and create something like that. Fish are gonna love it too.
Again, like in tandem here, I'm just looking at these. Like you've got something again. This is the same idea as that Flash Fave or the HDA Fave.
Right.
Like tons of movement to this, and then this like boxy kind of like stout Perdichingon style fly, and a Warrior that like. In tandem is just like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you're drawing attention with this guy, and you want to match the hatch a little bit more. Yeah, your point fly or your dropper, it's gonna serve that purpose there. So now, pretty sweet stonefly pattern, but yeah, and then that gets into that early summer time frame that
you can just keep fishing this.
Exactly.
Build some confidence in the early season.
Exactly, and just build through as you progress into the summertime. So. Yeah, so that's kind of the breakdown of where my mind's at in that springtime, getting out on the water finally, maybe,
Absorbing a little vitamin D.
not have to wear, layers of clothing. Your waders might fit actually kind of nice and comfortable.
Well, in that New Mexico, you guys just get it a little earlier than a lot of places.
We do. We're actually lucky that way. March is typically when we start getting out quite a bit. But, just like here in Colorado, we do get those remnant snowstorms that roll through. And, so we're still dealing with some snow, but, we get out of it and we're, high 50s, low 60s pretty quick in March. So, yeah.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thanks for running us through some of these flies here.
Yeah, for sure.
Since we talked a little bit about the flies, let's just spend a second talking about some of the gear and kind of how you build your system out for the springtime fishery. Let's start with kind of the subsurface world. You and I were chatting a second ago. You do things a little different, and I like it.
I do. So, yeah, with my background in the comp realm, I'm a big fan of adaptability and versatility, especially in my leader setup. I hate carrying a second rod. I never got comfortable with it. I know a lot of our guys on the team were able to do it. I just couldn't. So I kind of came across, so my own personal formula for my leader setup is 12-pound butt section, about 10 feet of that. And this leader's kind of set within the Phipps Moosh rules, so doesn't exceed the 2 rod lengths of the rod. So 10 feet of the butt section, again, that's 12-pound. Typically, I use Maxima Chameleon for that. And then I actually run a pretty long section of cider. I like to run 2 sections. So in this case, the Umpqua tricolor is a good one. I like running at least 3 feet of upper, and then I'll splice it and have another 2 feet. The reason why I like to do 2
And are you
sections,
tapering those down?
I typically would,
Okay.
just to help with turnover, but at the same time, you don't have to necessarily. 2X is pretty robust. It'll turn over well regardless. Reason why I have those 2 sections, one at 3 feet and one at 2 feet, is the 2 feet I can actually read a lot quicker if I have to drop it into the water. It's a shorter segment. There's less sections I got to count, right? So I think with 2 feet, there's like 3 color segments and that's it. So if I know 1's in, 2's out to the knot, and I'm good. The remaining 3 feet I have to, if I lose it in light, glare, whatever, and I need to look up a little higher and I can find it and track it back down again. So, or if I have to drop that 2 feet further down, I have more that I can read for my ciders. So
when you talk about versatility with a leader, Norm, what are the techniques you're fishing that with?
So what I'm looking at is obviously nymphing. So tight lining, having I don't really
traditional
run,
Euro
exactly.
stuff.
I don't run more than 2 flies typically, but just so I can achieve that for the most part. So having that overall leader length is 15 feet, and then building out my tippet from the tippet ring down. Varies from 4 to 5 feet typically, maybe 6 feet sometimes. But that's just so I have less line sag out of my rod tip, so having a little bit lighter leader than your traditional tapered leaders. Unlike micro leader, you lose a lot of that energy transfer if you try to transition out of it to cast any dry flies or anything with some mass or air resistance, if you will. So if I want to transition from my nymph rig and I see a fish rising and I'm like, oh, let's see if he'll eat a dry, I can cut my nymphs off and honestly just directly to my point fly or point, just tie on my dry fly.
An empty tag laying there.
Exactly, and just leave that tag hanging because I might go back to nymphing right after I catch that one fish, and then I can throw my low water Baetis right at it if he's up on blueing olives and pick him off. The one thing that inspired me was, I think during one of our practice we were watching a video on one of the checks and how he transitioned from a nymph rig, seeing a rising fish, switching to a dry and landing it in 45 seconds. So that was kind of the inspiration I had, or the drive I had.
That could be a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do we become more efficient in that regard? So that's how that leader built up came out. And, so honestly, you guys have something pretty close. You guys have the Phantom X Euro leader, which has actually a 20-pound butt section. but it gives you that turnover capability. And honestly, from the butt section down, you can, cut and modify your lengths if you want to. But
you do a lot of dry dropper on this style leader too?
So I can, yeah, exactly. So again, with that more air resistant, typically when you're running a dry dropper, you're running something with a little more buoyancy, a little larger in size, like a small chubby 14s or, 12s, as small as the chubby I'll go. You can turn it over a little bit more easily. So yeah, that's where how I typically set up and can transition in that regard. And honestly, I can actually throw small streamers on it too, double up on them, and be able to make that happen. Takes a little bit more practice, but it is possible. So yeah, that's just kind of a breakdown on my Euro nymphing leader. And on the flip side, having this tricolor, because these are what, 8-inch increments on these guys. Don't limit yourself to just trying to tight line with it. If conditions are tough, a lot of wind or slow moving water, put an indicator on it, and you can move it up those increments and really dial in your depth. So that's where this cider material can really come into play, as far as just integrating it into your leader in general. Cool trick with this too is if you move that indicator up and you have some of this high vis stuff underwater, you can actually watch it move and see what you can see what the subsurface current is doing, because a lot of times your indicator sitting on the surface isn't doing what the water current is doing underneath. So you'll see your cider move or deviate, so you know which direction you need to mend to correct your drift and reposition to get a better presentation.
That is an all-time tip.
Yeah, so
that's super cool.
Pro tip. So yeah, that's one cool thing that I've found utilizing this in conjunction with an indicator. So
I love it. Can you talk to us about how you like to rig for dry fly fishing? If there's anything treatment-wise you put on the dries, what that program looks like, and if there's any special rigging you do with it.
Yeah, so if I just wanted to really target dries, standard leaders always easy enough to work with. So we got the 9-foot Performance X here, nylon, down to 5X. I will taper that out, add at least really about 3 to 4 feet of 6X maybe, just to give it that suppleness or it won't turn over cleanly, but you'll get a little bit of slack in there.
Pile up that slack.
Just enough to allow that dry fly to float naturally on the surface there. So, and then from there, when I tie my dry on, like the low water Baetis again, has that CDC wing, dry magic is great. A little goes a long way for that. So just, all I do is just put a coating on there. I'll rub it between my fingertips, and whatever residue's left, that's what goes on the wing. So not a whole lot. And then, I'll grease up the cider, or grease up my leader, not on the tippet section, but I'll grease the remainder of the leader to help with mending or anything like that. So, not anything super crazy or, too technical, but just, having some thin diameter tippet to help with it. I guess I should drop back and say, running, if I do taper out to 6X, it's going to be fluorocarbon. So the Phantom X fluoro has been great for that, So
why fluorocarbon over nylon when it comes to that tippet section?
I do like to have that fluorocarbon just sink and sit in the surface film a little bit more. Fluorocarbon being slightly denser than water will just submerge and eliminate that tippet shadow that you get sometimes, especially when you're dealing with nylon, which will float and cast that shadow. So again, it's just putting focus on your fly and not the tippet, so the fish doesn't see it.
It's one less thing to spook off.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, sweet. I feel like you've kind of painted an awesome picture to go find some success in a variety of different scenarios for the springtime fisherman.
Yep.
So thank you so much. If people want to find you and ask more questions, book a guide trip, go do awesome Norm stuff, where are they finding you?
So if you have questions, you can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Ed Maktima Fly Fishing is where you find me. I also have a YouTube channel as well. So, I do put up tutorials and videos that kind of highlight the situation I'm in, and I talk through what I'm doing. So you can also message me on those, just submit a comment. If you want to book a trip, I do work with a buddy of mine, James Garrison. He's the owner of About Trout. And so I focus on actually a little niche realm that I have, Euronymphing on San Juan River, famous tailwater, and breaking it down there. But I can work with you on whatever techniques you're looking at. So that's where you can find me.
And find your bugs and bins.
Oh, and I'm actually at Los Pinos Fly Shop down in Albuquerque. So if you're in Albuquerque, come on by. I'm there 4 days a week, and we can talk fishing.
Sweet. And your bugs are in dealers' bins across the country, which is
exactly, yeah. So if you're not finding them there, put some pressure on them. Have them bring them in.
Strong arm.
Exactly.
Well, guys, thank you for tuning into another episode of Flies 4. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to like and drop a comment in there. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, happy fishing.
See you guys.